Nvidia, a company, is now teaming up with South Korea, Taiwan, United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, Germany, Vietnam, all to build out their AI factories. On screen here, you can see some of the companies that Nvidia has also teamed up with. It seems like they've teamed up with just about every single enterprise that exists on the planet today. If you don't invest in AI technology, you're gonna fall behind. It's a non-negotiable, right? But today in particular, we gotta talk about Nvidia's new partnership with South Korea. Not necessarily the deal itself, we'll get to it because it's still insane, but just what this could mean for the future of Nvidia, for the future of the AI infrastructure market. And because AI spending means so much, holding up the entire world economy at this point, literally contributing more to GDP growth than consumer spending, your dollars that you're spending on your services, your coffees, your products, whatever it is, AI is making up more of that GDP growth right now. And so it means a lot. If AI spending goes away, then we're kind of in a world of trouble. So what does this mean for Nvidia stock, and your job? Let's take a look. South Korean government and industry adds over 260,000 Nvidia GPUs for AI. Obviously, they're always used for AI now. And at this point, we all know AI is going to impact basically every industry as it stands on the planet today, which is going to take a lot of jobs from people like you, but also add a lot of jobs for people to drive innovation in all these different fields. So there's definitely a trade-off. We're seeing the negative of that trade-off, especially right now. And that's abundantly clear now as the October monthly job cut surged to a 22-year high. We're talking about the last time we saw this level of job cutting was the end of the dot-com bleed out. Nearly 1.1 million job cuts have been announced so far this year, the most since 2020. Obviously COVID, so that's not the greatest comparison to be making here. And you can see, what a surprise, who's getting hit the hardest. It's actually the white-collar jobs. It's technology. Everybody once thought that AI would first hit your most monotonous jobs. But what do you know? Your shelf stocking, your customer clerk, retailers, those industries are still seeing job cuts, but technology leading the way. Your engineers in particular, very interesting stuff. And that's because, well, AI does a lot of the stuff that a lot of those people do, and much faster. So from a company's perspective, it makes sense. If you have a software engineer augmented with AI, with some AI tool, and they can complete a task in the same amount of time it used to take 6 software engineers to do, then obviously you don't need 5 more software engineers necessarily. And I can promise you that trend is not going away anytime soon. In fact, it's probably accelerating. We can see right here that the South Korean government's going ahead and hopping on the AI bandwagon. Samsung, SK Group, Hyundai, Naver Cloud, all these companies are going all in, buying the Nvidia Blackwell GPUs to accelerate their model training, to accelerate their catch up to this AI arms race. And again, you can see it spans so many different industries, right? From robotics to cars to the cloud infrastructure to the actual government. And I think the most important part to consider is now we're not only seeing it domestically within the United States. Obviously, Trump's big push to reindustrialize America and bring manufacturing to America is evident, and that's where a lot of Nvidia's data center revenue comes from. But you can see this expansion starting to take place. Yeah, we can see it with the US government helping them build the next big supercomputer to accelerate findings in drug discovery and nuclear fusion and all sorts of different, very complex technologies. You see it with some of the wealthiest sovereign wealth funds in the entire world, Temasek and Kuwait. And then it goes without saying at this point that all your biggest tech companies are hopping in. Some of your biggest asset managers in the entire world, BlackRock, a company that manages over 13 trillion in assets, is also supporting the AI data center infrastructure build out. Again, another country getting chips, fresh new Nvidia AI chips to build out their big supercomputer. And yet through all of this adoption, all of this spending from international entities and governments in sovereign wealth funds to domestic entities into the US government, you have China still being left out of the race. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, and so much so that Jensen Huang's saying, hey, listen, at this point, we've accepted it. Don't even include China in the financial forecast, even though that would easily make for a $2 to $5 billion in revenue from China just conservatively. So I think we all get it, right? There's a theme in this market that Nvidia is the center, the kingpin of it all. After all, they're the epicenter of the AI industrial revolution, the biggest revolution the world, humankind has ever seen, in Jensen Huang's words. And at the end of the day, all these things exist and they have to coexist together to make the dream work for Nvidia, but they're really leading the charge. But what's really concerning for people with jobs is that obviously we know with tariffs, Trump is trying to increase manufacturing and industrialization in America. But the symptoms or the side effects of putting all these tariffs on all these other countries is that a lot of the companies that operate out of the United States also sell goods and services to other countries, not just within the United States. And what that means is that somebody at some point is going to have to make up for these tariffs. And Trump is obviously saying, well, those other countries are going to make up for it. But what you're starting to see is that prices aren't necessarily coming down. And if companies aren't lowering their prices, that means they're going to take it in the margin. In other words, companies aren't going to be able to sell you these products or services with these nice, juicy profits. At least those profits that we've been seeing for the past couple years now. However, I will say, and obviously one of the topics of this video, Nvidia probably isn't going to have anywhere close to that problem because, as we know, demand for compute is so incredibly high and undeniable right now that no matter what, they're gonna sell all the chips they make. And like we've talked about in the past, your financial expert, your analysts on Wall Street, they're saying data center infrastructure spending is gonna be 600 to 700 billion by 2028, maybe even by the end of the decade in 2030. And Jensen Huang saying that we're going to be at that 1 trillion mark by 2028 and maybe even 3 to 4 trillion by 2030. And what allows Nvidia to keep their margins so incredibly high in the face of tariffs is because people like you and I aren't the main consumers of these chips, right? We're not the ones buying $40,000 to $60,000 chips in quantities of tens to hundreds of thousands at a time. They're able to keep this chokehold over competitors like AMD and Broadcom because they literally own pretty much all of TSMC's advanced packaging capacity. And what does that mean? Well, if you don't have TSM on your side, then good luck manufacturing these chips anytime soon. And it's not just right now. Nvidia's saying, hey, we're going to need you to ramp up. We're going to need you to build a whole nother factory that's going to employ over 7,000 people and produce over 240,000 Blackwell systems. And I think this article that we just looked at just reinforces the point that, hey, it doesn't really matter how much money, in this case it's 250,000 Nvidia GPUs. Oh, that's only a few tens of billions of dollars. It sounds crazy to say that, but it's true when you compare it to deals like OpenAI where they're going to spend, anywhere from 300 to 600 billion dollars on Nvidia equipment over the next few years. The point remains, if the government realizes and has conviction that hey, AI is the way. AI infrastructure build out is the only way we're going to stay competitive across the global markets. And they're willing to shovel money at it. And then you have other countries. You have South Korea, you have Germany, Vietnam even building out their own supercomputers with Nvidia technology. Who would have guessed? Then there's clearly a lot of conviction still across the globe, across the space in general. Now in this video here, my objective isn't to go through the financial expectations and what the projections actually should be for Nvidia in their next earnings because it's rather transparent. After all, however many chips they make, they're going to sell. We pretty much know the numbers. I break down the fair value of Nvidia, and it's a lot more than it's sitting at right now in this video here, where we just use logic and numbers to come to a conclusion. And you certainly don't need to be a financial guru to figure any of that out. And I know we're keeping this video nice and short to the point here, but I think the whole point of this video and why this is so important to you as someone with a job and to people who own Nvidia stock in any fashion in is that Nvidia has partners spanning the entire ecosystem, right? Your consumer level products in your Copilot in AWS, in your robotics, your enterprise to enterprise level corporations that are selling to businesses, B2B, right? It literally takes up the whole damn screen, and this isn't even all of them. Then on top of all that, you have countries. You have the US government pitching in saying, we need the next biggest supercomputer that's going to help us reach nuclear fusion, help us reach new drug discovery, help us cure cancer, all these great things. You have the biggest asset managers in the entire world, some of the richest sovereign wealth funds, and now companies from other countries, governments within those other countries, all pitching in and buying in to the idea that, hey, we need this AI data center infrastructure build out, and obviously, who better to go to for that than Nvidia and Jensen Huang. Now, it seems like we're in this weird limbo state. We have a lot of job cuts coming in, especially to white-collar jobs. So your engineers, your financial analysts, that sector's getting hit the hardest. Yet you have some of the biggest tech companies in the entire world, your Magnificent Seven, making more profits than they've ever made in their entire history and growing faster than they ever have. And so you have this dichotomy of like stocks and the stock market are going to probably continue to do well, barring some worst case or black swan scenario. Yet you have people getting laid off and people becoming more efficient and productive at their jobs that companies just don't need as many people anymore. So I think as long as AI spending is here and here to stay, and as Jensen Huang has told us that is going to be the case, and as all this demand from countries, from governments, from sovereign wealth funds, from asset managers, from companies have told us, then it seems like companies are going to continue to be willing to cut jobs as long as these deals and announcements continue to come around. And you'd think eventually this stuff would start to slow down, but if anything, every single day we have a new announcement with Nvidia partnering with some AI software company or some new country to build themselves a massive supercomputer. So if those things remain constant, then I believe this trend will probably only continue for some time. Job cuts and corporate profits going absolutely crazy. We have some whole other issues to worry about with OpenAI. They pretty much just asked the government for a bailout in the case that they need it, because remember, the United States has to be the leader in AI technology. We don't want it in the hands of anybody else. And OpenAI is like, oh shoot, we pledged like $1.3 trillion to this AI data center infrastructure build out, and like we can't really afford that because we're only making 12 to 13 billion per year. So the CFO comes out and says, hey, we're open to some financing options from the US government if they would be so open to it, because, you know, we're probably going to need that at some point. So we're in this really weird time where these companies don't even have the money to make the purchases that they're pledging and actually purchasing right now. And of course, you have Nvidia profits absolutely moonshotting because nobody else can compete with them. And again, a topic for another video, but we've already seen with Intel, with MP, the US government is willing to make investments in US companies if it means to benefit the United States, even though it makes those sectors of the economy a little less competitive because you're literally getting selective treatment from the government, which kind of falls in line with more of a communistic approach than capitalistic. But again, I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with this. So for the time being, as we enter this treacherous period, best of luck. Nvidia stock has been taking some pretty big hits over these past couple days, and if Nvidia stock is falling, I'm not sure what's going to happen to all these other AI players. So are these the first signs of that AI bubble cracking, or are we really just at the beginning like Jensen Huang is telling us? That's it for me. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.